I thought it was just Grandma's birthday until my husband locked the car and said, "Something's wrong." At first, I thought he was joking. His voice was calm, but his eyes, I'd never seen that kind of fear in him before. The kind that makes your stomach drop before your mind even catches up. He leaned in at the party and whispered, "Get your bag. Act normal." I smiled at Grandma, told her I was going to the bathroom, and followed him inside. The second the sliding door closed, he grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but enough to tell me we weren't stopping. "I'll explain in the car," he said. Outside, everything looked normal. The balloon swinging in the breeze, laughter echoing from the yard, but my skin prickled. We got in the car, doors locked with a sharp click, and he stared into the rearview mirror, turning to me. Something's very wrong. My mind flashed back to the phone call a week earlier. Dad overly cheerful, inviting me to Grandma's 85th, my sister helping organize it. We hadn't been close in years. She treated life like a competition, and I was the opponent. But for Grandma, I agreed to come. When we arrived, everything felt staged. Perfect decorations, a spotless house, guests I barely recognized. But there were also strangers, men in jackets, standing around, not eating, not talking. Grandma sat in her favorite chair, wrapped in her blue shawl. Her eyes were tired, foggy. Her grip was weak, and she called my husband by the wrong name, something she'd never done. "Sierra," my sister brushed it off. "She's just tired." But the way she said it made my stomach twist. Later, my husband pulled me into the hallway. There are wires under the porch, not for power, audio, or video. And those men outside, not guests. I overheard one say, "Time the drop." My blood ran cold. And he told me something worse. Grandma's bathroom cabinet was empty. No heart meds, no prescriptions. "I think they're sedating her," he said, "just enough to keep her quiet." And I found papers, legal forms with her forged signature, a declaration of incapacity. It hit me like a punch. If they could prove she was unfit, they could take everything. Her estate, her bank accounts, her house. We played along until cake. Grandma could barely lift her head. My sister stood behind her, smiling for photos like everything was fine. My husband gave me the signal. It was time to go. We left calmly, passing Dad in the hallway. "Great cake," my husband said with a smile. But the second we were in the car, he turned off the main road. One of those men was on the phone as we left. "I don't want them following us." Then he pulled out a flash drive. Photos of the wires, the hidden pill bottle, the forged documents, even a man in medical scrubs with a duffel bag near the basement. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. He called the police. We met them at a gas station, handed over the evidence, and followed them back. By the time we arrived, the music was off. Most cars were gone. Sierra opened the door, smiled too bright. "Officers, is something wrong?" They asked to see Grandma. She was still slumped in her chair, voice weak, but when she spoke, it cut through the room. "I'm not crazy, and I didn't ask to be locked in this chair while you take my house." My father froze. My sister's hand shook. The officers escorted them outside without another word. As paramedics checked Grandma, she found my hand. Her grip was still weak, but her voice was steady. "You came back for me." I held her hand tighter. "Ways. I thought it was just Grandma's birthday party, nothing more." But then my husband locked the car door behind us and said in a low voice, "Something's wrong." At first I laughed it off, thinking he was joking. His tone was calm, but his eyes betrayed a terror I'd never seen before, the kind of fear that grips your stomach before your brain can even process it. As we mingled at the crowded party, he leaned in close and whispered, "Get your bag. Act normal." I forced a smile at Grandma, told her I was going to the bathroom, and slipped away with him through the sliding door. The moment it closed behind us, he gently grabbed my wrist. Not enough to hurt, but a firm reminder that we weren't stopping. "I'll explain everything in the car," he said quietly. Outside, everything seemed normal. A balloon swayed gently in the breeze. Laughter drifted from the yard. But my skin prickled with unease. Once inside the locked car, my husband stared into the rearview mirror, then turned. to me. This is bad. Something's very wrong. My mind raced back to a strange phone call a week earlier. Dad had sounded overly cheerful, which was unusual. He invited me to Grandma's 85th birthday. My sister Sierra had been helping organize it. We hadn't been close in years. She saw life like a competition, and I was the opponent. But for Grandma, I agreed to come. When we arrived, the whole scene felt artificial. Perfect decorations, a spotless house, and guests I barely recognized. Strangers stood around, men in jackets, not eating or talking. Grandma sat quietly in her favorite chair, wrapped in her blue shawl. Her eyes were tired, clouded, and she called my husband by the wrong name, something she'd never done before. Sierra dismissed it. She's just tired. But the way she said it twisted something in my gut. Later, my husband pulled me aside in the hallway. There are wires under the porch, not for power or video. And those men outside? They're not guests. He lowered his voice. I overheard one say, "Time the drop." My blood ran cold, and then came the worst part. Grandma's bathroom cabinet was empty. No heart meds, no prescriptions. "I think they're sedating her," my husband said, voice low. Just enough to keep her quiet. He showed me papers with her forged signature, legal forms declaring her incapacitated. It hit me like a punch to the chest. If they proved she was unfit, they could steal everything. Her estate, bank accounts, house. We played along until the cake was served. Grandma barely lifted her head. Sierra posed behind her, smiled too bright for the occasion. My husband gave me the signal. It was time to leave. We walked out calmly, passing Dad in the hallway. "Great cake," my husband said with a smile. The second we were in the car, he turned sharply off the main road. A man in a jacket was on the phone as we left. "I don't want them following us," my husband muttered. He pulled out a flash drive filled with photos of the wires, the hidden pill bottle, the forged documents, even a man in medical scrubs carrying a duffel bag near the basement. I couldn't catch my breath. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. He called the police. We met them at a gas station, handed over the evidence, and followed them back. When we arrived, the music was silent, and most cars were gone. Sierra opened the door, her smile too sharp. Officers asked for Grandma. She sat slumped in her chair, voice weak but steady. "I'm not crazy, and I didn't ask to be locked in this chair while you take my house." Dad froze. Sierra's hands trembled. The officers silently escorted them outside. As paramedics tended to Grandma, she found my hand. Her grip was weak but determined. "You came back for me," she said. I held her hand tighter, feeling the weight of what we had uncovered, and knowing this was only the beginning. This extended version enhances the original by adding emotional depth, atmospheric tension, and narrative clarity while maintaining the core events and details. Let me know if you want it adapted for any specific tone or style. Story 2. After my father-in-law's funeral, my jobless wife inherited $379 million. Suddenly, she demanded a divorce, saying, "You're useless to me now." I replied, "Don't regret." This later lull. After the divorce, my father-in-law's lawyer burst into laughter at my ex-wife and said, "Have you read the will carefully?" My ex-wife turned pale. Chapter 1. The Funeral and the Fortune. The air at the funeral was heavy, not just with grief, but with the undercurrent of whispered calculations. My father-in-law, a self-made tycoon, had left behind an empire worth nearly $400 million. My wife stood by the casket with a solemn expression, but I'd been married long enough to know the difference between sorrow and anticipation. Her tears were for the cameras and the extended family. Her eyes gleamed with the weight of inheritance. A week later, the will was read. She inherited $379 million outright. No conditions, no delays, just instant power and wealth. That night, she didn't bother hiding her disdain anymore. "You're useless to me now," she said coldly, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "I want a divorce." I sat back, almost amused. "Don't regret this later." "Lowell," she sneered, already thinking she'd won. The papers were signed swiftly. She thought. She was walking into a life of endless luxury, free of the man she believed was dragging her down. But she hadn't read the will carefully. Chapter 2. The Will's Hidden Trap. The day of the divorce hearing was supposed to be her triumph. She walked into the lawyer's office draped in designer clothes, dripping with new jewelry, tossing her signature onto the final documents as if signing away 30 years of marriage meant nothing. When it was done, she leaned back in her chair with a smug little smile. Finally, free and rich, just the way I deserve. But the father-in-law's lawyer didn't smile back. Instead, he opened a thick leather binder and cleared his throat. Mrs. Collins, forgive me, but have you read the will carefully? Her face faltered for the first time. What do you mean? It said, I inherited everything. The lawyer chuckled, shaking his head. Number, you inherited nothing by yourself. You and your husband were named as joint beneficiaries. The inheritance is held in a trust controlled by the marriage. By divorcing him, you forfeited your share entirely. The blood drained from her face. That's not possible. The lawyer slid the binder toward her, pointing to the clause highlighted in neat red ink. Your father wanted to ensure his fortune stayed within the family. It explicitly states that if the marriage dissolves, control of the trust defaults to his son-in-law alone. She gasped, clutching the edge of the table. Her diamonds and designer outfit suddenly looked like props from a bad play. The lawyer's eyes sparkled with amusement. So, you see, Mr. Collins isn't leaving with nothing. You are. Chapter 3. Her Desperate Counterattack. The very next morning, my phone lit up with messages. She'd gone public. Posts on social media carefully crafted to make herself look like the victim. After 30 years of sacrifice, my husband left. Me penniless when I should have inherited my father's fortune. He manipulated the will. He betrayed me. Hundreds of her friends and distant relatives piled into the comments with pity. Some even spat venom my way, calling me a thief. But I didn't. Answer, I didn't need to. The legal fight within days. She filed an appeal, hiring an expensive new lawyer who promised her the clause could be interpreted differently. But the will was ironclad. Her father's lawyer had drafted it himself, and every line was airtight. The court dismissed her appeal. In less than 15 minutes. The emotional manipulation. She tried the children next. Late-night texts, sobbing phone calls, begging them to talk to Dad and convince me to share. But they already knew the truth, that she'd kicked me aside the moment she thought she no longer needed me. My daughter sent her one text back. You had Dad, you had us. You chose greed instead. Don't call again. The public shaming. With the legal route blocked and her family refusing to shield her, she tried the court of public opinion. She organized a dinner with some of my father-in-law's old business associates, spinning the story of her cruel husband, who tricked her out of her rightful inheritance. What she didn't know, the lawyer had already briefed them. They knew the truth, that she'd inherited nothing the moment she filed for divorce. That dinner ended with her being politely asked to leave. The same people who once showered her with compliments now wouldn't even return her calls. Her fortune had vanished in an instant. Her reputation was crumbling by the day, and for the first time she realized the power had shifted permanently. Chapter 4. Weaponizing the fortune. I didn't waste time gloating. My father-in-law had entrusted me with his empire, and I intended to honor it. But I also knew there was a poetic kind of justice in making sure every dollar of that $379 million reminded her of what she'd lost. Financial revenge. First, I established a charitable foundation in my father-in-law's name. The mission: supporting hardworking families, veterans, and small businesses. The exact opposite of the greed and vanity that had consumed her. Every time a press release went out, her name was noticeably absent. Headlines read, Collins Foundation donates $10 million to local schools. Son-in-law at the helm. Her calls to correct the record were ignored. The trust was in my name alone. And legally, she had no claim. Social revenge. She tried to cling to her old circles, the country club, the charity galas, the expensive luncheons, but those doors shut quickly. Donors and friends who once courted her now shifted their alliances. Invitations that used to arrive weekly never came again. Worse, she couldn't even keep up appearances. Her lifestyle had been funded entirely by her father's money. Without it, the luxury cars and the penthouse became financial burdens. Emotional revenge. The cruelest cut wasn't financial or social. It was personal. The children who once admired her now saw her greed clearly. My son told her bluntly, "Dad worked for everything he has. You tried to throw him away the second you thought you didn't need him. Don't call us again." Hearing that, from the kid she thought would always side with her, left her hollow. From where I stood, I didn't need to raise my voice or make threats. Her downfall was built into the very foundation of her greed. And every day she saw my face in the news, smiling next to the projects and charities funded by the fortune she thought was hers. The wound cut deeper. Chapter 5. The Public Reckoning. The charity gala was the largest of the year, hosted in the same grand hotel ballroom where for decades my father-in-law had celebrated his successes with the community. This year, the Collins Foundation was the title sponsor, and I, not my ex-wife, was seated at the head table. The chandeliers glittered. Overhead, cameras flashed and reporters clustered near the entrance. Everyone who was anyone in business and politics was there. Halfway through the evening, I noticed her. My ex-wife, dressed in last year's gown, slipping in alone. No friends on her arm, no invitations in her hand. She wasn't on the guest list, but she thought she could bluff her way past security. For a moment, her eyes darted toward the stage where I was preparing to speak. She froze when she realized the entire night. The banners, the brochures, the slides on the big screen bore, "My name, not hers," the speech. When I took the stage, I began with gratitude. This foundation exists because of the vision of my late father-in-law. His legacy was never about money. It was about responsibility to family, to community, to those who work hard and sacrifice for others. I paused, letting my gaze sweep over the crowd. Then I leaned closer to the microphone. That's why his will was written so carefully, not for greed, not for vanity, but to protect what mattered most. From the corner of my eye, I saw her stiffen. Whispers spread like wildfire through the audience. Everyone knew what I meant. The final twist. At the end of the evening, the foundation announced its first major project, a multi-million-dollar program funding scholarships for single parents who had been abandoned or betrayed, giving them a chance to rebuild. The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed again, and in the back of the room, my ex-wife turned pale because she realized in that moment every dollar she thought she'd stolen was now being used to help people she'd always looked down on. The walk out. As the night ended, I walked past her without slowing. She tried to speak, her lips trembling, but I didn't break stride. The crowd parted for me, reporters snapping photos, allies shaking my hand. Behind me, she stood alone, ignored, irrelevant. The same words she had once said to me echoed in my mind, and I smiled quietly to myself. "You're useless to me now." But this time it was the truth, and it was her turn to live with it. Epilogue. A year later. 1 year passed, and the world could not have been more different for the two of us. Her life. The tabloids that once printed her gala photos now ran exposés about her fall from grace. Heiress squanders inheritance, loses everything in divorce. Her so-called friends had abandoned her long ago. Without money to maintain her lifestyle, she was forced to sell off her jewelry, then her cars, and finally the penthouse itself. By the end of the year, she was renting a cramped apartment on the outskirts of the city, working part-time just to keep the lights on. When she tried to claw her way back into society, she was met with cold shoulders. To the circles she once adored, she no longer existed. Your life. Meanwhile, the foundation thrived. The projects you launched, scholarships, veteran housing programs, small business grants, all bore the Collins name, but with your face beside it. Your children, once caught in the middle, now stood proudly with you at events, introducing you as their father, not as her ex. Every major paper carried glowing profiles. The son-in-law who saved the legacy. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. You thriving at the center of influence and respect, her fading quietly into irrelevance. The final encounter. It happened by accident, almost like fate. You ran into her at a quiet coffee shop one rainy afternoon. She looked smaller, older, her once perfect hair tied back, a second-hand coat draped over her shoulders. For a moment, her eyes lit up. Hope, desperation, maybe even the urge to beg. But you simply gave a polite nod and walked past her, not breaking stride, because the truth was undeniable. She had once told you, "You're useless to me now." But in the end, it was she who had become useless to everyone, and that was the most poetic revenge of all. Was this revenge perfectly justified?